Peace, and welcome to the One Black Perch Publishing Channel, a resource for writers, an archive for our beginnings, and the primary source for our updates on book releases, events, other announcements like new merch in our shop. One of the most important things that belongs in our archive is growing our knowledge base. There's a lot to know if you're going to commit to help authors reach their writing and career goals. So spending time becoming more well-equipped to help authors is a part of the responsibility, in my view. And authors still need editors, at least for now, so don't let anybody fool you on that. I normally don't set reading goals, though. I'm pretty organized with my reading schedule, and I keep categories to make sure that I'm progressing in whatever subject I'm following. Basically, my reading list is broken into two, one for my publishing and business roles and the other for my personal and creative projects. But I never thought that to set a goal for how many books to finish within a year. I just set my timer for an hour and a couple of times a day, write some reflections, responses, or recaps for myself, and then sub in the next book when I'm done. But this year I'm following my normal reading pace to see if I do finish the same amount of books, around the same amount of books by the end of the year. Last year I read about 30 something books, over 30 books. I'm aiming for 40 this year, but I have more on my calendar this year too, including publishing operations for a large part of that. So we'll see. Speaking of which, one of them is the first issue of our literary journal. So if you write fiction, nonfiction, or poetry, you should think about submitting. Details for that later, though. But anyway, I've seen channels where people have read over 100 books in a year. If I didn't have writing goals and appreciation for spending time completely unstimulated, and of course, family and friends, I probably would get to 100 maybe. I have a physical copy of 20 of the books on my list, so I have more titles to grab, but here's 10 of the books on my list that supports a project or area that I'm keeping up with for the publishing company. First is Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Buolamwini. She's the winner of the Technological Innovation Award from the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, and advises world leaders on policies to prevent AI harm, basically, from, protect us from AI bias. AI has been a really popular topic in the media for about a year, it seems like, and there's implications for businesses and government as everyone tries to figure out how to use AI to improve whatever it is they do. And of course, there's some cool looking things happening with text to video and text to image generators, and of course, the large language models. But like most leaps we take in most industries, it's important to keep watch and mitigate and eliminate any drawbacks and protect people who are usually adversely impacted by radical advancements that we make. Racial and gender bias are often baked into things that we make if we're not thoughtful. So I'm hoping that Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy kind of demystifies that conversation for us non-techies. The book description, though, it points out that while AI technology seems like it's a new development, she's been at the forefront of AI research since her time at MIT as a student, working in that future factory. And one of the things that she argues is that algorithmic justice should be included when we speak of civil rights as we move forward in the foreseeable future, which AI is expected to be a part of. I recently saw an interview that the LA Times Book Review's YouTube channel, speaking on some of the implications that she already sees and what she projects could happen if appropriate policies aren't put into place. The subtitle is "My Mission to Protect What's Human in the World of Machines." So, it sounds pretty existential, right? We have to raise basic questions for our more narrower purposes, like concerning writing, editing, printed books, literacy, marketing, automations, publishing, those kind of things, and trying to understand what processes within the publishing industry are expected to change most. Next is Black Futures by Kimberly and Jenna Wortham, were edited by. Even though they said that they didn't set out to make a comprehensive document, Black Futures sought to answer the question, what does it mean to be Black and alive right now? And it includes essays, photography, art, and even some screenshots from social media posts from different voices and authors and artists and things like that. So it does still feel like an anthology of sorts. Story in Henry Louis Gates comes to mind just flipping through here. That section's like legacy, Black is still beautiful, justice, joy, Black power. But in the intro, the editors, Kimberly and Jenna, they shared that this collaboration started in the DMs, which marks our current social norm. So perfectly. But one of the subjects that I started reading about is design theory. And I had just finished The Black Experience in Design, which is another series of interviews and essays and articles and things like that from various Black designers. So I picked up Unmasking AI, sort of in the spirit of reimagining and redesigning a future we can feel more empowered to be ourselves, feel unimpeded by the things that we're told are tools to help us, which usually turn around to become weapons that hurt us. Some of the writers that are featured are Zadie Smith, Nicole Hannah-Jones, Eve Ewing, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Alicia Garza. It's over 500 pages, but it's not the kind of book that you want to read from end to end. And like I said, it's an anthology, and the editors describe it as an invitation to go down different rabbit holes of the Black experience and the current zeitgeist. So I'm sure I'll be doing just that and grabbing the work of at least a few of the authors referenced in the book. Next is Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury. Bradbury is probably best known as the author of Fahrenheit 451 and The Martian Chronicles, but this book of essays on creativity has been widely read and recommended by writers trying to unblock themselves. I'm always reading something on the craft of writing. I've never picked up a book on writing without learning something, or maybe I haven't run into a badly written or useless one yet. You ever run into a useless book on writing? Let me know if you have. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. A few of the essays are entitled How to Keep and Feed a Muse, Drunk and in Charge of a Bicycle, and Shooting Haiku in a Barrel. Clever titles don't always guarantee that it's going to be a great read, but their job is to pique your interest, to get you to flip through the next page. But it's a pretty short read, about 120 pages. I may read it a couple of times before moving on, especially if there's like exercises or prompts to use and incorporating in my own practice or in building a workshop. Inventing the Truth by William Zissner. Prior to this, I actually read On Writing Well by William Zissner as well. In that book, he actually focuses on tips and advice for writing nonfiction generally. And in another video, I actually share a handful of tips I picked up from that book for defining a book idea, defining your nonfiction book idea. Even though it was helpful, especially in his beginning essays on like the sentence and word choice, there was so little on memoir that I followed up by picking up his book specifically written for aspiring memoirs. Toni Morrison, Henry Louis Gates Jr., Frank McCourt, Annie Dillard are some of the authors who share their experience expressing some issues that they had to confront in writing it, and some of the biggest takeaways and lessons. Even though fiction is like far more enticing a literary path to a lot of people, some writers have a higher interest in telling stories without having to use the veil of fiction standing between the writer and the reader. Nero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. I saw this book suggested a lot. It was written in 1949 and still heralded as one of the essential reads for writers. He wrote extensively on how like mythology, modern psychology, and religion are used for effect in writing. The hero's journey is covered in the first part of the book and outlined in like the first few chapters. And the second part covers the cosmogonic cycle, which is the pattern of world creation and destruction. He wrote quite a few books that help authors become more thoughtful in their stories and grounded in some of the elements that we're already sort of accustomed to, like a book on the use of religious metaphor and a book on the divine feminine. But when I get to this one, I'm going to need to take a lot of notes. Just flipping through here, I can see why I suggested a lot. It's detailed and well-researched with a bibliography in the back if you want to take a deeper dive. I almost replaced a book that I'm currently reading to start this one several times. I'm kind of geeked to read this. It's a thicker read too, so take your time with it. The 3 a.m. Epiphany by Brian Keatley. I picked this one up last summer. I hadn't seen many like recommendation videos on it or anything like that, but it had some good reviews and it came through, the book shopper algorithms. And I felt like it should be a part of my new publisher's library as a resource. The author though, Brian Keatley, he's a professor of creative writing and taught grad and undergrad workshops. I'm also taught at the University of Denver, which is one of the few PhD programs for creative writing. So I might check out their curriculum and course description, see if I can borrow some programming from them. But I don't often experience creative blocks, but a lot of aspiring authors do. And there's over 200 experimental writing exercises for like reinterpreting your experience and putting together original ideas so your writing has like a distinct effect, like a voice. Despite the book promising unconventional or like uncommon writing practices, the chapters address some of the usual suspects. So a description, point of view, dialogue, but it has some other specific chapters dedicated to humor and exercises for your works in progress if you feel stuck. But clearly you don't have to go through this one front to back. You can just pick through the areas that you need help getting unstuck or if you need a spark. At least that's what I plan to do. The Making of a Poem by Mark Strand and Evan Boland. This is an anthology of poetic forms, another resource that you can use as you see fit. Mark Strand is a Pulitzer Prize winner for his collection of poetry, Blizzard of One, and is a professor at Stanford University, a professor of English. It's good to get familiar with form before you transgress form or step outside of form. But the back matter actually gives, honestly, a more straightforward explanation of what to expect. It says that the two poets look at some of the mysteries and headaches of poetic form. Mysterious and headache, it sounds like struggling with a poem. Each chapter is devoted to each known form with closed readings and explanations of the examples. Everything from sonnets, ballads, sestinas, odes, pastorals, and from a wide variety of poets, some including Emily Dickinson, Gerard Manley Hopkins, William Wordsworth. A lot to choose from, which you can appreciate. It gives you a chance to find your taste in form and which poets you may learn best from. On Writing by Stephen King, a memoir of the craft. Stephen King's resume is full of publishing achievements with numerous bestsellers, books adapted to film, everything you will want. The blurbs for this one issue some very high praise from Wall Street Journal and Roger Ebert, Entertainment Weekly. They all love it. Ebert said it's more useful than any book on the craft of writing since Strunk and White's Elements of Style. Stephen King is a storyteller, not a teacher by trade, so it isn't solely a book of skills, practices, or steps or anything like that, even though he does offer practical advice, including use of memory as content for fiction. One review called it part memoir, part masterclass, so it traces his life starting in his youth, where his creative writing beginnings took hold with comic books. I peeked at the first dozen or so pages, and I may move this one up on my writing list. I want to get to this sooner than later. Why wouldn't you be excited to take advice from a worldwide bestseller? You don't have to write thrillers or horrors or anything like that to gain from a writer of thrillers and horrors like Stephen King. This is Avid Reader by Robert Gottlieb. I have no jacket for this. It's a hardcover. I have no jacket. It's naked out here. Robert Gottlieb held top roles in the publishing industry as editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, Alfred Knopf, and The New Yorker. And Avid Reader is his memoir, published in 2016, and outlines his life editing books by authors who would go on to become worldwide bestsellers, award winners, and prominent voices. Some of them are Toni Morrison, Salman Rushdie, Bob Dylan, Bill Clinton. Recently, I saw an interview of Toni Morrison where she credits him for his feedback on her novels, and it made me want to read his memoir right away, even though I had bought it almost a year ago. I don't expect much to be gleaned in terms of editing skills, but I hope to get a closer look into how he navigated relationships with the diversity of authors, what he saw in their work that convinced him to work with them. I'm sure it's not without his dramas too. He had a long career, so I'm interested to hear how he framed his start in publishing and ultimately became a widely respected authority in such a competitive industry. Gottlieb passed away last June at 92 years old. That's a long life in books and in a book that I'm looking forward to reading. Elements of Eloquence by Mark Forsyth, another popular reference book for writers. He runs the popular blog The Inky Fool, and a blog about words, phrases, rhetoric, prose. Writers want to do more than just tell a story. They want the lines to perform particular functions. In the story, they want to hit particular emotional beats, trigger a specific response in the reader. While we may be generally familiar with how language works or how phrasing works, it's important to know some of the names of the tools that writers can use to affect readers in a single phrase. Some popular tools mentioned are like alliteration, synesthesia, hyperbole, personification, but there's nearly like 30-something more of these tools that he shares and explains with like examples that range from Shakespeare's plays to fast food ads. Because this is reference material, there's temptation to take occasional peeks in here and work through some of the tools. It'll be just as fun and insightful to experiment with when I get to it in a little while. One of the quotes right at the beginning is, does an explanation make it any less impressive? I take the mystery of how great a thing is made might seem to degrade its impressiveness, but it's in phrasing in a style that's like resonant, surprising, exciting, and effective, like what you want as a writer. So you know how that works. Forsyth has some other books on the craft of writing that are bestsellers too. So whenever I get to that one and finish it, I may have to double back and grab another if it's just as useful as it seems. But 2024 is going to be a busy year, but I fully expect to get through my reads with no problem. One of the things on my docket I mentioned earlier is our literary journal. Currently taking submissions for our first issues. So we're reading poetry, nonfiction, fiction, short stories, including excerpts from larger works that can be read in isolation. The email for the submissions is in our description. Soon I'll be sharing the other 10 books on my list that I have physical copies of already. Those 10 are for a couple of writing projects of mine. So there's some diverse subjects to come on, like health, compassion, masculinity, architecture, just a mix of a few things I'm working on. But what books on writing have you found the most helpful? Put it in the comments along with your experience of using it. If you found this video helpful, hit like and share with your writer friend. Thanks for watching.